Right now, someone is wearing a stolen Rolex and has absolutely no idea. This is the story of how that happens, how a watch that was torn off one person's wrist gets resold to another as clean, legitimate box and papers pre-owned with a serial number that comes back clear and a seller who genuinely might not know what they are holding. Here's the truth, the boutique counter will never explain to you. The same things that make a Rolex worth stealing, the fact that it is small, portable, untraceable, holds its value, and sells in minutes, are the same things that make it almost perfect to launder. A stolen watch does not get melted down or stripped for parts like a stolen car. It gets cleaned up, passed through a few careful hands, and put right back on the open market wearing a brand new identity. Sometimes within days, often in another country, and far more often than the industry will ever admit, it ends up on the wrist of a buyer who did everything right. We're talking about a pre-owned market now valued at over $24 billion globally, and that scale is exactly what gives stolen watches somewhere to hide. So we are going to answer one question. How does a watch stolen on a Tuesday end up legally on your wrist by the following Monday? And to get there, we are not going to drown you in crime statistics. We are going to follow a single watch, one Submariner, reference 124,060, from the moment it leaves its owner's wrist to the moment money changes hands for it again. Because once you see how short that journey really is and how little stands in its way, you will never look at the secondhand market the same way again.
It starts on a wrist. A man steps out of a restaurant, glances down at his phone, and never sees the second rider on the moped. The whole thing takes about 12 seconds. There is no smashed display case, no alarm, no getaway driver idling outside a jeweler. Just a quick grab, a sharp twist, and a watch that was on one wrist is now in a stranger's pocket and 3 streets away. This is the part people get wrong about watch crime. They picture a heist, but the reality is far more ordinary and far more organized than that. In the cities where this happens most, it is not random at all. There are spotters who linger outside boutiques and watch meetups, people who know exactly what a green bezel GMT Sprite, reference 126720 VTNR, is worth, or what a Pepsi or a Batman goes for at auction, and exactly who is wearing one. There are crews who do nothing but the grab. And the person who actually rips the watch off your wrist is, in business terms, a contractor. They almost never keep it. Within hours, that Submariner has been sold up the chain for a fraction of its value, a few $100s, to a middleman who already knows where it is going next. And here is why it is a watch, specifically. Steal a phone, and it is bricked the moment it is reported, locked, tracked, worthless. Steal a car, and you have a 2-ton object that is hard to hide and easy to flag. But a luxury watch has no GPS, no pin, no kill switch, no number plate. It does not lose a cent the second it is taken. A $15,000 object fits inside a closed fist, and it crosses an international border in a coat pocket without a single sensor going off. It is one of the most efficient ways on earth to turn a violent 30-second act into clean, spendable value. The watch, you have been told, is a store of value. That is exactly what makes it worth stealing. The thief understands that better than most owners ever will. So the watch is gone, and what happens next is the part that should bother anyone who has ever bought pre-owned. You file a police report, you give them everything you have, and what you have really is a serial number. That number feels like a tracking device. It feels like the thing that will eventually bring your watch home. It won't. The uncomfortable reality is that there is no single authoritative global registry of stolen watches that every dealer, platform, and buyer is required to check before money changes hands. There are private databases, several of them, databases like the Watch Register, Inquiris, and the Art Loss Register, but none is complete, none is mandatory, and none of them is automatically run at the point of sale. A few brands will flag a serial in their own internal systems if a watch comes in for service, but they generally will not confirm a serial's status to a random buyer. And they will not tell you who owns it because privacy rules cut both ways. Police forces, including the National Crime Agency and Interpol, which both maintain watch theft intelligence, recover only a small fraction of what is taken, and a watch that has already left the country is effectively off their map entirely. Put all of that together, and you get a quiet, devastating fact. The moment a watch leaves your wrist, it becomes anonymous. The serial number is not a leash, it is just a number, one that can only be checked if someone actually bothers to look, against systems that mostly do not talk to each other, in a market where the financial incentive is not to look too hard. The watch has not just been stolen, it has been erased. Now comes the laundering, and you can forget the image of a criminal mastermind because most of this happens through ordinary friction and ordinary distance. A stolen watch usually waits. It sits while the owner's outrage cools and the police report goes stale. Then it moves, often across a border, into a market where buyers ask fewer questions and sellers face less scrutiny. Each pair of hands it passes through adds a little more legitimacy and a little more fog around where it actually came from. By the time it surfaces for sale, the chain of custody is genuinely unclear, even to the people handling it. But the real magic isn't the watch, it's the paperwork. In today's market, a full set, the original box, the warranty card, the booklets, can add thousands to a watch's price, and more importantly, it melts away suspicion. A full set says legitimate, cherished, accounted for. And here's the secret most buyers never learn. Boxes and papers are their own thriving trade. They get bought, sold, and matched to watches they never originally came with. What you end up with is effectively a franken watch in paperwork form, genuine oyster steel and Cerachrome on the outside, completely fabricated history underneath. A clean set of papers doesn't prove a watch's history, it just proves that someone somewhere had a box. In the worst cases, serial numbers get tampered with outright, polished down, altered, defaced. But most of the time, it doesn't even need to come to that. The watch reaches a legitimate-looking dealer listed on Chrono24, Watchbox, or even eBay with a clean website and good reviews, who bought it in good faith from a supplier, who bought it from a trader, and not one of them ran it against a database that probably would not have flagged it anyway. That's the part that should unsettle you. Laundering a watch usually doesn't require a villain, it just requires a system with no checkpoint. And that's exactly the system we have. And here's a detail that makes the industry's response look especially hollow. Rolex launched its own certified pre-owned program through Bucherer in 2022, a direct play for credibility in the secondary market. But even Rolex's own certified pre-owned program does not guarantee a watch was not stolen before it entered the certification pipeline. A watch can have a clean serial in Rolex's internal system, pass every authentication check, carry the CPO sticker, and still have a victim somewhere waiting on a case file. Certification confirms what a watch is, it still doesn't confirm where it's been. And so the watch comes home, not to its owner, but to the open market, looking absolutely flawless. Excellent condition, full set, priced fairly, just a touch under market, enough to feel like a smart buy and not enough to feel like a trap. The seller has a real storefront and a wall of glowing reviews. The buyer does everything right. They research the seller, they inspect the watch under a loupe, they check that it runs, that the bezel clicks true, that the date snaps over at midnight. Everything checks out. Everything checks out because nothing in that entire process actually verifies that the watch wasn't stolen. Authenticity and provenance are two completely different questions, and the market has trained us to ask only the first one. Is it real? Yes. Is it rightfully being sold? Nobody asked and nobody had to. The buyer pays and they walk out genuinely thrilled. And somewhere across a city or across an ocean, the first owner is still checking a case file that will never close. One watch, two victims, and in between them an entire industry quietly profiting from the very thing that made the crime possible in the first place, liquidity. The frictionless, sell it in minutes, no questions, resale market that enthusiasts celebrate as proof of value. That's the same machine that turns a stolen Submariner back into cash. The watch was never really laundered by a criminal, it was laundered by the market itself. Which brings us to the obvious problem. If a stolen watch is this easy to wash, you would think the industry would have fixed it by now because the tools genuinely exist. Brands could maintain an open serial status check that any buyer could run before a purchase. Platforms like Chrono24 and Watchbox could demand verifiable provenance, not just authentication. A single mandatory stolen watch registry, something like the watch register made compulsory, could be checked at the point of every legitimate sale, the same way a car's history. None of this is technically hard. So the reason it does not happen comes down to one thing: friction is bad for business. A frictionless resale market is a profitable one. A watch that can be flipped in minutes with no questions is worth more to everyone in the chain than a watch that drags a paper trail behind it. Brands sell more when secondary values stay high. Dealers earn more on fast turnover. Platforms take their cut on volume. At every single layer, the people with the power to add scrutiny are the exact people who lose money by adding it. And that is the dirtiest secret of all. It is not that stolen watches exist, because every market has theft. It is that the watch industry has quietly done the math and decided it is cheaper and more profitable to let stolen watches keep circulating than to build the system that would stop them. The gap you have been watching this whole video is not an oversight. It is a feature, and it is a feature nobody wants to admit is a feature. So let's go back to where we started. How does a watch stolen on a Tuesday end up on your wrist by Monday? Now you know the whole route. 12 seconds on a sidewalk, a serial number that was never really a leash, a weight, a border, a fog of paperwork, databases like the watch register and inquirers that do not talk to each other, and an industry that would genuinely rather not ask. And since the system will not protect you, here is how you protect yourself. Treat provenance as seriously as authenticity, and ask not just whether the watch is real, but where it has actually been. Push for the original purchase receipt in the first owner's name, not just box and papers, because a full set proves packaging, not innocence. Run the serial against the watch register and inquirers, because it will not catch everything, but it costs you nothing. Be quietly suspicious of the watch that is too clean for its price, the flawless full set sitting just under market. Buy only from sellers who will guarantee clear title to you in writing, because that guarantee is the one thing a launderer cannot fake without taking on real risk. The next time someone shows you a perfect pre-owned Submariner, full set, fair price, running like a dream, you will know the one question nobody at the counter wants you to ask. And you will understand exactly why the answer is so hard to get. Because that is the watch business. The cleaner the watch looks, the harder you should look back.